Hello everyone, this is Dr. Rekha, resource person for Mahatma Gandhi National Council of Rural Education. We are looking at management decision making tools course. We have completed 3 sessions. In the first session we looked at the introduction to research, role of statistics in management decision making and types of research. In the second session we have covered the steps, we have looked at steps in research process. And in research process we have looked at problem discovery and definition, literature review, identifying research gaps and how do we formulate hypothesis. In the third session we looked at the research design, components of research design and classification of research design. And in today's session we will be looking at sampling design, methods of data collection, data processing and analysis and research ethics. Okay, the sampling design we will be looking at it little bit brief. We will be looking at sampling design in brief in today's session. We will look at in depth on sampling design in the next chapter, that is next module, module 2, chapter 2. So in today's session, by the end of this session 4, you will be able to explain sampling design, you will be able to choose appropriate method of data collection, you will be able to comprehend on data processing and analysis. So let us start with sampling. What do you mean by sampling? Sampling means selecting a particular group or sample to represent the entire population. So it is not possible to study the entire population. Right. So we will choose a sample to study, to characterize the entire population. Let us take the same example of the mentors. What do mentors learn? That the example that I have shared with you all in the last session. So if we can say that we have to study what do mentors learn across the mentors who are there across the country in different organizations, it is not possible to study each and every mentor in every organization. So we will choose a sample to characterize or to represent the entire population based on the study that we carry out with a particular sample or a sample from the population. We will characterize the entire population, right. So the sample is a subset of a larger population. So the researcher have to decide who is to be sampled, how large a sample can be depending upon the availability of the samples and depending upon how easily the data can be collected, then how will sample units be selected. So these different types of sampling methodologies or sampling design, we will be looking at it in depth in our next chapter, right. So we will look at brief steps involved in sampling design process. So if we have to define the target population of the study, right. So if we are studying the let's say if we are carrying out a study on the effect of introduction of this product, the newly introduced product by People's Bank. So our target population will be the farmers who are using this product, newly introduced product across the country. They are the target population, right. If among them we have to determine the sampling frame, that is who are these people who will be buying this newly introduced product. The People's Bank have introduced a criteria that they will be providing this financial assistance to the farmers who have 1 acre of cultivable land, right. So the sampling frame is the farmers who are using this product, newly introduced product, and who are 1 acre of 1 acre of cultivable land, and we have to select a sampling technique. So in order to choose, so it is impossible to study all the farmers who are using the newly introduced product by the People's Bank. So we have to choose a sample. So in order to choose a sample, there are several techniques that are available for choosing a sample. We will look at those techniques in detail in our next chapter, and then based on the sampling technique that we choose, we have to determine a sample size. Then execute the sampling process, right. So we will get into the next step in the research process, which is methods of data collection. Once the sampling research and sampling design is done, we have to collect the data for our study. So there are various methods available to collect the data for the study. So there are the two sources are available for collecting the data, secondary sources and primary sources. As we have already looked into these sources in our earlier sessions, I will touch upon it little briefly here. So the secondary sources could be documents that are available, or the information that are available in the websites, books, journals, earlier research which are published in the journals, blogs, newspaper articles. And if we are studying an organization, the organization will be maintaining documents. So we have to study, we can get the information from the documents that the organizations have maintained, right. So these are the secondary sources, and the primary sources, observation, interview and questionnaire. Observation, it could be participant, you being a participant and observe. So the example that I have told you about the NGO Bhumi that have formal mentoring program. So you can observe and collect data by being a mentor, and you can also try to gather information about what do mentors learn, or by experiencing it, by participating in the activity, or by being a non-participant, by being just an observer, you will also be able to gather information. So there are two types under observation, participant and non-participant. So by being participant, you can collect the information, or by not being not participating, by just being an observer also you will be able to collect the data. Then the next is interview method. Interview method, you have structured and unstructured. You can have structured questions, and the unstructured is like open-ended questions. You can have a questionnaire with you while you are going to conduct the in-depth interview with the person. So on the topic that you want to study on the topic that you want to collect the data on, you could prepare a set of questions that you can pose, that you can ask the interviewer to gather information on, or you could have unstructured questions. So it is usually suggested that you have a mixture of these structured and unstructured questions while you are going for collecting the data from the interviewer. You could have a structured questions, 2 or 3 questions, and based on the answers that the interviewer provides you, you can ask lead questions. So there are it is unstructured. So it is suggested that the researcher can do interview or do the data collection through interview method by using a mixture of structured and unstructured, depending upon the situation and depending upon the topic the researcher is studying on. Then next is the questionnaire. Through questionnaire we can collect the data using mails as well as collective, and even now you can collect it individually. You can collect the survey by physically administering the questionnaire to the participants, or you can email it to the participants and collect the information, or you can gather the people from whom you have to collect the from whom you want to collect the data on, and you can administer the questions in collective, right. So it is always said that if you it is suggested that if you collect the information in person, if you administer the questionnaire in person, you will be able to answer some of the queries that the participant has, the person who is responding to the survey has. it is suggested, or it is effective, it is more effective as well, but due to the constraints of time, or due to the time availability of the researcher, or due to the lack of time to complete the study, the researcher can decide on the methodology that to be chosen to collect the data, right. So the next step in the research process is data processing and analysis. In data processing and analysis, after we collect the data, we can analyze the data the data using different methods. Again, there is a different methodology that is followed for analyzing the data in qualitative research and quantitative research. The qualitative research is different from the quantitative research, right. So we will look at how do we collect the data, or how do we analyze the data collected through qualitative research, and how do we analyze the data collected through quantitative method. Qualitative research, the data is collected in qualitative research is usually interviews, in-depth interviews, or focused group discussions, or through observations. There are certain they are available in the content form, in qualitatively, which cannot be quantifiable. So there is a different methodology that is used to analyze the data that is collected through qualitative research, right. So the types of qualitative research, the data can be collected, the data can be analyzed using these types, any of these types. There are different types of qualitative research. There is content analysis, narrative analysis, discourse analysis, and grounded theory. We will look into these in detail. So the first one is content analysis. It is summarizing quantitative analysis of messages relying on scientific method and not limited to types of variables measured or context of messages. So the first data is collected, and the researcher reads through or examines the data, making themselves familiar with it, So through interviews, or through listening to the interaction that the participants have during the focused group discussions, the researcher will be noting down, taking notes. So the researcher will read through that data or examine the data carefully before analyzing it, before quantifying the qualitative data that the researcher has collected. Then the researcher identifies coding units. So based on the information that the researcher has obtained during the interviews or during the focused group discussion, the researcher will try to draw some patterns in the information that has been collected. So if it is an interaction between the mentors and the mentees, they will look at so what type of conversation the researcher is based on the interaction that the researcher is having, the mentor is having with the mentees. He or she will take some patterns, emerging patterns that from the interactions, and will codify them. We will look at an example of content analysis shortly. So the data is analyzed by applying the coding units that the researcher has identified, and tally is made. A tally is made of the number of times that a coding unit appears, and the qualitative analysis is made. Say for example, an example for a content analysis could be, so the based on the observation between the interaction between the mentor and the mentee, the researcher identifies among let's say 5 to 6 interactions that he or she has observed. They looked at the researcher, the mentor is keenly listening to the mentee, and the researcher, the mentor is facilitating the mentee in identifying the solution through guidance. The researcher is, the mentor is not advising, but facilitating the mentee in arriving at a solution. So these are some of the observations that the researcher would note on: the listening, the keen observation, facilitating for a solution. So these are the coding units that the researcher might identify, and these units will be will be further counted upon. So how many times the researcher has observed that the observed listening as a attribute to the mentor in the among the 5 or 6 interactions. So how many times the researcher has identified that the mentor has facilitated the mentee in identifying a solution, right? So 5 times. So they, based on the number of the times that the researcher has observed, the tally marks will be made, and then the analysis would be made, right? So next type of analysis is narrative analysis. It analyzes content gathered from various sources. The source can be personal interviews, field observation and surveys. So below is an example that you can look at and see how these narrations are analyzed and how these are put in different buckets, right? How the researcher is trying to identify the analyze the content, the interaction that the Jody and Irene is having. So based on the sentences or statements that the people, the Jody and Irene are conversing with, they will identify so what the theme that they are talking on. So in the first conversation in the Jody, the researcher identifies that the way that Jody is explaining his orientation, it is about whom. Then abstract, he or she is able to identify abstract in the conversation, in the communication, and it says about evaluation, right? It is annoying to have the family around you all the time. So it is orientation about whom, it's about the family members, right? So likewise, so each and every sentence communicated is analyzed, and certain patterns, so themes are bucketed based on the information or the communication provided. The next analysis is discourse analysis. It is used to analyze the interactions with the people. It takes into consideration the social context under which or within which the communication between the researcher and respondent takes place. It focuses on the lifestyle and day-to-day environment while deriving any conclusion. So the last type of qualitative research analysis is grounded theory. So it is used to explain why a particular phenomenon happened. Then using grounded theory for analyzing quality data is the best resort, and it is applied to study data about the host of similar cases occurring in different settings. So the process, usually it is a cyclical process until a theory is proposed based on the information that is collected. So data is collected and coding is done, and then theoretical sampling is done. Then if still the theory is not evolving from the data that is collected, again it goes back on for collecting more data, right? So usually this grounded theory will be emerged from the different types of cases, by analyzing different types of cases or different types of settings. For example, the usual example that we are seeing from the last few sessions about the mentors. What do mentors learn by being in the mentoring relationship? So we could take up the cases of mentors in different contexts. The mentors in IT organizations, mentors in public sector, mentors in private sector, mentors in manufacturing industry, mentors in NGOs, and then we can study the patterns. We can study what common patterns are emerging, or what is that it is saying if to be an effective mentor, or if the mentor have to study, if the mentor learns by being in the mentoring relationship. So what are the themes that are emerging? From that we can propose a theory based on a particular phenomena that has happened. Using grounded theory, we can analyze the quality data and propose a theory for further research. right. The next step in the research process is data processing and analysis, is data analysis in quantitative research. Now, so far we have seen how do we analyze the data in qualitative research using the subjective information. How do we analyze the content, right? Now we will look at how do we analyze the data in quantitative research, which is descriptive statistics. So in descriptive statistics, of the data is analyzed through frequency, that is count, percent, frequency. It is used to denote when often a particular event occurs, and researchers use it when they want to showcase how often a response is given, right. So this is a simple descriptive statistics. Frequency is a simple descriptive statistics. The number of males, number of females, age, gender, right. The educational qualification, right, PG, UG or others. So this can be counted, this can be provided numbers, how many respondents are in male, how many respondents are female, simple count, count. Then the measures of central tendency, you have mean, median, mode. This method is widely used to demonstrate distribution by various points. Researchers use this method when they want to showcase the most commonly or averagely indicated response. Then measures of dispersion or variation. Here you have range, variance, standard deviation. It is used to identify the spread of scores by stating intervals. Researchers use this method to showcase data spread out, how the data is spread. It is used to showcase how the data is spread across the responses, and it helps in identifying depth until which the data is spread out, that it directly affects the mean. Another one is the measures of position. It is analyzed using percentile ranks and quartile ranks. It relies on standardized scores, helping researchers to identify the relationship between scores. It is often used when researchers want to compare scores with the average count. And again, we have seen about descriptive statistics. Now we will look at the data analysis in quantitative research in inferential statistics. So inferential statistics, we infer based on the hypothesis or the estimates that a researcher proposes. There are two types: estimating parameters and hypothesis test. Estimating parameters, it takes statistics from the sample research data and uses it to demonstrate something about the population parameter. For example, if the researcher wanted to study the 10,000 students who are studying in a university, the researcher wanted to study if how brilliant are these students, how knowledgeable are these students. It is impossible to study the whole sample, whole 10,000 students. So the researcher would take 10% of the sample, or let's say 1,000 students. He or she will consider 1,000 students and study their knowledge, or study how knowledgeable or brilliant these students are. So based on the results of the study, they will estimate the total population. They will estimate the population. So if the researcher identifies that this 10% population, 10% of the population whom he or she have chosen is among them is 50% of the respondents are brilliant, and 30% are average, and 20% are low. So based on that, they will estimate the whole population, saying that the 10,000 is the population. If 10,000 is the population, out of that 50% would be brilliant students, 30% would be average, and 20% are low graded students. So based on the estimate, based on the smaller sample, the whole population is estimated. Right. Then the hypothesis test. We have also looked at this example for while formulating the hypothesis. right? This hypothesis test, it's about sampling research data to answer the survey research questions. So hypothesis, a statement is formulated wherein either to prove it true or false, whether to accept or reject the hypothesis. So the farmers who use modern equipments in farming have more production. So that can be either proved as true or false. It can be either accepted or rejected based on the study that the researcher would carry out. It can be inferred, right? So commonly used method for data analysis in research are, these are the some of the commonly used methods: correlation, cross tabulation, regression analysis, frequency tables, and analysis of variance. Correlation, when researchers are not conducting experimental research, wherein the researchers are interested to understand the relationship between two or more variables, they will opt for correlation research methods. How correlated, how far these two variables are correlated. For that, they will be, if they are not conducting an experimental research, then the researcher would go for studying the correlation between two variables. Then cross tabulation, also it is called as contingency tables. It is a method used to analyze the relationship between multiple variables, right? Then regression analysis, it is used for understanding the strong relationship between two variables. Researchers do not look beyond the primary and commonly used regression analysis method, which is also a type of predictive analysis used, right? This method, regression analysis, is used to understand the relationship between two variables, independent and the dependent variable. What is the relationship between independent and the dependent variable? Let us look at an example of a regression analysis where the relationship between independent variable and the dependent variable is studied. For the same example which we have looked at about the study of the students in a university. So how brilliant or how knowledgeable these students are. So where we say that the type of faculty members or the teaching teaching of the faculty members have an effect on the knowledge of the students. So if that is the case, so the researchers would study the relationship between how far the teaching is affecting the knowledge level of the students. So in order to study those two variables, regression analysis is used. Then the frequency tables, this is a statistical procedure used for testing the degree to which two or more vary or differ in an experiment. Then analysis of variance is used for testing the degree to which two or more vary or differ in an experiment, right? A considerable degree of variation means research findings were significant. In many contexts, ANOVA testing and variance analysis are similar, right? So the last part in this research in the unit, in the chapter 1, module 1 is research ethics. So there are certain ethics a researcher needs to follow while carrying out this study, while administering the surveys to the participants. There are certain ethics that a researcher, while carrying out a study, a researcher has to follow certain ethics, right? So it is so we look at from the researcher as well as the participant point of view, what are some of the things that the researcher have to take care while doing this research, while carrying out this research study. First thing is honesty. The researcher have to be honest to the participants who are participating in the study, that the objective of the research, it has to be specified, mentioned to the participants why a researcher is carrying out this study. What is the objective of this study? What is the objective of the study? And beneficence, it has to be, it has to have a benefit to both researcher as well as the participant. There is it should not harm the participant while the research is carried out. the research process, or the while administering the questionnaire, or by participating, while enabling the participants to participate in a experiment, the researcher has to ensure that it is not harming the participant. So whatever data that the participant is providing should be kept confidential. Confidentiality has to be maintained. It should not harm to the participants, right? So the before, and also if you see in the surveys, in the questionnaires, in the top part we will say that the information that is shared by you will be kept confidential. It will be used only for the research purpose. It will not be shared with any other individual. So that is a statement that a usual survey questionnaire would have, that researchers have to essentially mention in the questionnaire. Informed consent, the researcher have to take consent from the participant before administering the questionnaire, that the participant is willing to participate, willing to provide the information that is required for the research study that is carried out. Then autonomy, the researcher have to give the autonomy to the participant. If it means that the researcher should not force the participant to be part of this experiment, or to participate in the survey. So the freedom must be given to the participant the freedom must be given to the participant on willingness to participate. If the participant is not willing to participate in the survey or in the experiment, the researcher must not force them to participate in the survey or in the research study, right? And the non-maleficence, it should not harm the data whichever is provided by the participant should not it should be maintained. Confidentiality should be maintained. It should not be shared with others, wherein it will create problems for the participant. It might the participant may end up in trouble. So it should be non-maleficence, and researcher must be responsible. Take the responsibility. Be responsible and treat the participant with dignity, with respect. Yes, so before I conclude this, so we have completed the chapter 1, module 1. So in this chapter 1, we looked at the research process in detail. Step by step procedure has been done. So I want you all to do this activity before you watch the second before you watch the next video, where we will start explaining about where we will look at the chapter 2. Before you watch my next video, I want you all to do this activity, right, which will give you a hands-on experience on carrying out a research study. So the activity is, there are certain steps that I have proposed that you can follow and get an hands-on experience of the steps that we have looked at in our research process. The goal of the chosen problem statement is to study the popularity and usage of software widget in rural areas. So there are software widgets which are introduced by government. So your problem statement is, you have to study the popularity and usage of software widget in rural areas, and you collect possible background information about different applications by doing a literature review on the applications available for the rural citizens. To mention a few of the apps that you might have to research on are Meri Sadak, Self-Reliant, Operation Asha, Swayam Shikshan Prayog, Jayalakshmi, Agrotech, Swachh app. So these are some of the apps that you have to research on. Do a little bit of literature review and collect information on these apps before proceeding further. And further researching on the apps, you might find that the usage of above apps are very mere since the date of launch. This might be your finding based on the literature review that you do. So based on the identified problem, formulate a research question on why is the usage of the mobile apps very less despite the apps being exclusively launched for the benefit of the rural population. So this is your research question, right? To study the above, this can vary based on the literature review that you are going to carry out. I am just proposing an example here. So you can take your own, based on the literature review that you have done. If you want to frame your own research question, that is fine. You can go ahead and doing it. This is just an example that I am proposing here. And to study the above question, plan a descriptive research with the target population to study the status quo of the use of the app and the attitude awareness of villagers towards the app. And simple questionnaire could be constructed to collect the information. And further to the data collection, you will identify the reasons for the less usage and least awareness of the availability and usage of the apps. So prepare a project report based on the findings of the study. So the last step in the research process is conclusions, findings and reporting, right? So you, based on the analysis that you carry out with the data that you have collected, you will analyze it and you will present the findings in the report format by explaining the steps that you have followed. So if you do this activity, you will get an hands-on experience on the steps of research process that we have discussed in this chapter. So before we meet in the next module, before you look at the before you watch my next video, I suggest all of you to do this activity and watch my module 2 chapter 2 video. Thank you.